Welcome to Break the Needle. I'm your host, Adam Zivo, and I'm here to tackle Canada's problems with drugs, addiction, and crime. Today, we're joined by Dr. Julian Somers, a clinical psychologist who made a name for himself in British Columbia through his principled and sometimes iconoclastic approach to drug policy. Dr. Somers is a professor at Simon Fraser University, where he has overseen some of the province's largest studies into addiction and homelessness. He was ostracized by the provincial NDP government after challenging some of their harm reduction policies, but found himself vindicated when these policies proved disastrous and were later abolished or reformed. He has recently explored the idea of mass addiction, a concept which helps us understand what is happening in Canada today and which we will be discussing as our topic for this show. Welcome. Welcome to the show, Julian.
Thanks, Adam. It's really a pleasure to join you.
So, Julian, what exactly is mass addiction? What do you mean by this term?
So, to get to an answer, we first need to start with a refresher on what's addiction. And the way we use the term historically and popularly and even currently scientifically is this is a what's known as a Janus term or an auto antonym. It appears to include its own contradiction. Um, One way of thinking about what that means practically is to imagine a simple magnet with a positive and negative side to it. And on the positive side of addiction, addiction means something that's chosen and something that serves to enhance meaning in our lives, often serves to bring us together with other people, establish a place of belonging socially. On the negative side, addiction refers to something that is not chosen, but rather feels as though it's imposed on us, it's involuntary, and it serves to actually distance us from others and distance us from experiences of meaning. And that's the negative meaning of addiction that's captured in things like our diagnostic reference, where the core criterion for a negative addiction when we're diagnosing it in mental illness settings is the experience of loss of control despite harmful consequences of the addiction. And the through line is important because when many people experience recovery from negative addiction, the way they describe it is that the biggest differences are that they now feel a renewed sense of agency and choice and purpose, as well as just manifold experiences of new meaning. That on addiction. Mass addiction is a fairly rare phenomenon. It doesn't happen all that often. The forerunning example that I would use is China in the decades following the Opium Wars, and where the prevalence of addiction, at least among men, in many regions was the majority. It's a shockingly high epidemic standard and the highest recorded that we have to this point. Um, what happens in mass addiction, and we see it now in places like British Columbia, is that the harmfulness of people experiencing addiction starts to include other members of society. So, for example, first responders, business owners, family members. These experiences don't involve all those individuals experiencing addiction themselves. It's more like a spread of trauma and a spread of addiction related symptoms to the point where overcoming the mass addiction problem requires more than attending to the needs of each individual who's experiencing a harmful addiction themselves. It requires some kind of greater collective healing in order to put the entire infrastructure that supported mass addiction behind us. And that's one of the principles that I think needs to guide reform, has guided effective reforms previously. So
Mhm.
China's again an example, Portugal's an example, there are others. But in terms of overcoming addiction, we need to think about the whole population and not only those who we can see on our streets or in our communities that have been suffering with the addictions themselves.
So, is it fair to say that mass addiction is when an addiction is so endemic in society that it spills over into the entire population and therefore requires a holistic policy approach rather than just focusing on addicts themselves?
Yes, Yes,
Okay, great.
exactly.
Because we're going to explore that concept in a bit more detail when we get back from the break.